I've got a whole mess of cedar trees growing around me. But at the same time, I still see even the most advanced form of tree or plant, the Angiosperms. So we've, looked at gymnosperms. We went out and collected specimens and looked at the pine cones, looked at the male and female cones. So we've got specimens of that, so we're pretty good on that. I'm going to really focus this little video, the next couple of videos, on the Angiosperms, okay? So Angiosperms. So when you think of Angiosperms, when you think of a flowering plant, you're probably thinking of, roses and blue bonnets and Indian paintbrush, the classic wildflowers. I'm seeing it's we don't have as many flowers in the woods here, but right here on the edge of the fence line, there we go. There's a little flower right there. Okay, see the flower? There we go. There's a flower, and I can see some out in the pasture. They're small. I don't have a lot of big Indian paintbrushes or blue bonnets growing yet, but I do see an example of a flowering plant here that you may not normally think of as a flower, okay, or a flowering plant. You have trees, and many trees are dicots, flowering plants. So there we go. See that? These are flowers, right? And they're the flowers of the flowering pears that we see growing all over the place these days. And in fact, they are also an example of an angiosperm, a flowering plant. So I'm going to stop and go over and look at an example of other types of trees that are included in the flowering plants, the angiosperms. For example, oak trees. So I'll be back. Here we can see big old, all these oak trees, big massive oak trees, and they're just now starting to put flowers out. But if you look at them closely right now, you'll see some other little tassel-y looking structures hanging down, and hopefully those are showing up halfway decently. You can see the little baby leaves growing on them, but those tassels, those are actually the oak's flower. Okay, so these are flowering. It's time of year that they're flowering and dumping out tons and tons of pollen into the air. You could probably go outside and look at your car or look at the gutter and see all kinds of yellow pollen accumulating everywhere. Remember, pollen is the male gamete of a flowering plant, and it doesn't require water, right? So it can spread by wind, insect pollinators, birds, any number of ways that pollen can be spread, and it does not require water. So that is a more advanced trait compared to the non-vascular plants and the seedless vascular plants, because remember, they both require water for reproduction. They have swimming sperm, so that's a major adaptation for life on land. They've left the absolute requirement for water. Obviously, they still need water to live, and they have roots that transport water up to their tissues. But at least for reproduction, water is no longer required. Okay, guys, so talking about angiosperms, or the flowering plants. Here I've walked over to another place where you can see a bunch of different kinds of wildflowers growing. We have the dewberries or blackberry vines starting to bloom, and I don't know if you can see that little butterfly fluttering around. See a few bees in here too. So we've got the dewberries, and in the background there you can see these yellow wildflowers. When I gave you the notes on the board, hopefully you took them down, we split the angiosperms into two major groups of plants. One group called the monocots, mono like one, that's going to be a clue, and dicots, okay, dicots like die or two. Well, what that refers to is a particular anatomical form that the two types of plants take early during germination. But that's not going to be really easy to point out in a little video like this. But I will show you at least one other way that you can really easily distinguish monocots from dicots. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this particular plant right here. And I don't know, let's see if it'll show up, how well it's going to show up. I'm going to pull this leaf off. So if you examine the leaves, where is it? There we go. If you examine the leaves of monocots versus dicots, one thing you will tell, the one characteristic you can use to tell them apart is the type of vein pattern that they have. So you'll see this leaf has that really heavy duty vein running right down the middle and some smaller veins branching out. I hope you can see that on this video. So the brains are kind of branched out, kind of in a web-shaped pattern. Let's see if I can find another one here. I'll be right back. Yeah, here we go. This is a good example. See, so this is a leaf from the dewberry plant, blackberries. And you can clearly see that the veins kind of branch out branching off from the center. Okay, see if I can get really zoomed in there. And I don't know how well you could see it, but even the brains, you still have that main vein running down the middle with the branches coming off either side. And then if you look at it closely, you could also see the branches of the branches. Okay, here we go. That's a good look from the back side. There we go. So this is a typical pattern of dicot leaves. Okay, dicot. Now I'll see if I can find you a good monocot leaf to demonstrate the difference. Okay guys, so here I've got a patch of monocots, okay? Monocots, it just looks like grass, doesn't it? Well, guess what? That's pretty much what monocots are. They're the grasses. Cereals are another example. So wheat, barley, corn, those are all examples of monocots. And grass, all the different kinds of grass. So what's a characteristic of grass? Well, the long, skinny blades, right? Long, skinny blades. That's pretty common characteristic of the monocot grasses. And remember with the dicots where the veins were kind of branched out? Well, one thing you'll notice, might be kind of hard to see in these guys, but I'll try. We'll try to zoom in. And I might be able to find a different type to help show you this. But the veins, this one I can kind of see, hopefully it'll show up. The veins in monocots are all parallel, all straight. They run the length of the leaf, and all the veins are running in parallel to each other. They are not highly branched. So trying to find, there's a, remember the dicots have the branched veins. So I don't know, let's look over here. Here we go. We zoom in on one of these dewberry leaves and see, there we go. There we have again the branched vein pattern of the dicot leaf. Okay, so dicot leaves are branched and kind of like web-like, spider-like. They branch off a lot, whereas the monocot leaves veins run all in parallel, lined up nice and neat, running the whole length of the leaf. So that's the easiest way to identify the difference between a monocot and a dicot, just by looking at the plant. So we talked about how to distinguish dicot from monocot angiosperms by looking at the leaf. There's a few other ways. One requires a microscope and looking at slides of stems under the microscope, which I can't easily do with a smartphone, but there is another way, using the flowers. And when you look at a flower, for example, these little itty bitty yellow flowers, if I zoom real close here, hopefully you can see that. And if I count the number of petals on this flower, I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals, okay? 5 petals. If we look at this flower, one of the dewberry flowers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dicot flowers typically will have flower parts in multiples of 4 or 5. Okay. Monocots, on the other hand, have their flower parts in multiples of 3. So you can count the petals, and you can even count the sex organs of the flower, the anthers, or the female part, the carpel, well, mainly the anthers. There's only one carpel, but most of the times you can count the flower parts. But the easiest thing to do is just count the petals. I don't see any monocots flowering just right now, but I may run to a nursery and show you an example of a flowering monocot. So some of you may be asking, well, how am I supposed to find pictures of these plants? I don't have woods or parks or anything like that nearby. You might be back home in the middle of downtown Houston. Okay, well, although I would rather you go out into a park or the woods and find some examples of live, native grown plants. I understand, these are special circumstances. I understand. So if you're wondering where else you might go to find stuff like plants and flowers, well, where am I right now? Okay, see that over my shoulder? Yeah, I'm at Walmart. Okay, so I'm gonna go inside here in a minute and embarrass myself and show you some examples of monocots and dicot plants you can easily find at any nursery. Okay. All right, here we are. Flowers everywhere. Okay, so dicots are pretty easy to find. Remember, just look for the branched veins. Okay, if you haven't found any out in the woods or park or the campus grounds, just go to a nursery or to Walmart. So here, example, earlier I said you can always identify a monocot by counting the flower parts. Look at here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, multiples of 3. If you count the stamens, you'll also see they're multiples of 3. So there's all kinds of examples of dicot or monocot plants here. Look closely at the leaves. Remember, that's the other way. Look for parallel veins. Of course, here there's some ferns in the background there, so examples of the seedless vascular plants. And just about all the rest of these are probably going to be dicots. Okay, so all kinds of examples for you there. Just keep your distance from other people. All right, guys, so I was just on my way home from Walmart, and I happened to see these little purple flowers on the side of the road. And I'm way out in the country here, so there's no way I can get hurt. If you try to find a plant for your montage report on the side of the road, please be careful. Pull well off the road. Don't trespass on people's private property, of course. But let me just show you this. This is a pretty typical example of a monocot plant that grows wild. Well, where is it? There we go. That grows wild. Now remember what I said, multiples of 3. Okay, multiples of 3 means it's a monocot. So you can see the 3 flower petals. And if you carefully count the flower parts there, the anthers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And also, this is also a good one for, look at the veins. Look at the veins in the leaf. See how they all run parallel, lengthwise across the leaf. So this is a great example of a typical monocot angiosperm. Okay, guys, so I am going to post some more detailed instructions on the Canvas page to help you find the list and find the specimens that I want you to take pictures of for flowering plants, like that tulip tree behind me there. That will be included in your plant montage. So we've already done everything up to gymnosperms that we need for the montage. We'll just be adding some more stuff for the flowering plants. Now, normally there would be some microscope slides and stuff to look at, I'm still trying to figure that out. So for now, we'll just stick with the leaves and flowers, and then I'll provide more instructions in Canvas for anything else that needs to be added to the montage. Okay, signing out.